Hi, and welcome to a special edition of one of my Oilers blogs. I have a friend of mine here with me today that I'm going to interview his thoughts on the Oilers. His name is David Graham. Welcome to my little YouTube channel, Dave.
Thanks for having me, Ryan.
Thank you for being here. So, Dave may seem familiar to some of you out there, and that is because he has already starred in one of my blogs called Group Therapy during the 2016-17 season, as well as he had a brief cameo in my Life as an Oilers Playoff Fan video. And I think I've even just called you out by name when addressing my audience. Dave is from a cozy little community in southern Alberta, and he lives on Snob Hill, but don't let that fool you because he is far from it. Dave is a very kind and well-spoken gentleman, and that is the reason why I wanted him on the show today. I think Dave knows as well as my audience, I get very frustrated discussing the Oilers with fans who are unable to have a respectful, intelligent conversation.
I'll try my best to be respectful and intelligent.
Yes, and that is why you are here. So, I just want to test your knowledge as an Oilers fan.
All right.
To see if we should even go ahead with this interview.
Well, yeah.
So, my first question for you is, and I know for a fact that you've been an Oilers fan for the same time period I've been a fan, longer,
yeah,
but definitely the same time. So, my first question for you is, back in 1997, when the Oilers played the Dallas Stars in the first round of the playoffs, as everyone remembers, they scored 3 quick goals in Game 3 to tie it. The game went to overtime. Kelly Buchberger won this game for the Oilers in OT. My question for you is, there was an Oilers player who came into the Stars zone and took a massive hit to get the puck to Buchberger to set up the winning goal. Who was that Oilers player?
All right. Well, let me just, before we get to the trivia section, I remember this game with cinematic clarity. I remember watching this in the basement of my parents' home, 1561 Beachway in High River, Alberta. And I remember some details from this game. I remember when Doug Waite scored the first goal with about 3 minutes left, he kind of half-heartedly gives the old celebration, but he doesn't go crazy, and I think it was just because he expected to lose that game. And I remember Mike Greer scored the second goal, I think, or maybe maybe he scored the third goal.
Yes, he did.
Okay, and one of the defensemen scored the other one, but I don't remember. Here's the thing, hockey trivia for me is not really my strong suit. I remember who I was with, where I was when these games happened, and I remember one of the Stars defensemen, maybe Sador, stumbles a little bit as Buchberger goes by him.
Okay, so you're confusing Game 7 Marchand blowing by Grant Ledyard.
Oh, okay.
But you had some of the details right there. Just to correct for our audience out there, Doug Waite scored at the 4-minute mark on a backhand from the top of the circle. Kovalenko scored a power play goal just over a minute later, and then Mike Greer tipped in a point shot from Dan McGillis with a minute 55 or 56.
So why did you invite me here? It's clear. It's clear you know.
Okay, well, the thing is you haven't answered the question.
Yeah.
Who dropped the puck to Buchberger?
I mean, I have no idea.
Okay,
None.
That's all right. It was Mats Lindgren.
Mats Lindgren. See, I don't even remember Mats Lindgren.
You don't remember the player. That's all right. Okay. Well, you still got 2 more cracks at it.
Okay, let's go.
Okay, so the next one, and this one, you should get this one because we were actually at this game. In 2003, we went to a playoff game again, Oilers Stars. They played every year. We went to Game 3. Again, Game 3.
Yeah.
The Oilers won that game 3-2.
If you had asked me what the score of that game was, I wouldn't have been able to tell you. Here's what I remember from that game.
Okay.
What we were in the third period, we were trailing going into the third period.
That's
and
right.
I knew that Dallas had not lost a game when they were trailing going into the third period that entire season. And I remember when the Oilers scored either the game tying goal or the game winning goal, I screamed so loud like I couldn't see, I couldn't think. And I remember there was a brown-haired, sparkly-eyed girl that came with us to that game who married some other guy. I don't know.
Yes. And this is good. I'm glad that you
So
remember these details.
that's the trivia that
Okay.
I have embedded from my life as an Oilers fan. Go ahead and ask me the
Okay,
question.
so the question is, who scored the goal to tie that game at 2? It was a bad goal on Marty Turco.
I don't have any idea. I know for sure I was there.
I'll give you a hint.
Okay.
There's an ABBA song that refers to this
Okay.
guy.
There's probably Fernando Pisani.
Yes, excellent.
Okay.
Good job, Dave. So,
Thanks,
okay, you're
man.
1 for 2.
All right.
All right, you can get through this. The
Okay.
final one is 2006. I remember watching the Oilers beat the Sharks in the playoffs that year, and as soon as the series was over, they showed a shot of White Avenue, and there was Dave celebrating on White Avenue.
Yeah.
This might be your first on-screen appearance since then.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
probable. Yeah.
interesting. So anyway, in the 2006 run, that team, they allowed the least amount of shots on goal per game.
Yep.
They were a very good defensive team. However, they had the worst save percentage in the league. It's amazing they made the playoffs, actually. So they picked up Rolison.
Yep.
But during that season, they ran a 3-man rotation.
Yeah, okay.
Can you name all 3?
Okay, well, I know Markkanen
Yes.
and Conklin, and I think the last guy's name was Morrison.
Yes. Well
And-
done, Dave.
Morrison was, they would bring Morrison off the bench for a shootout.
Yes.
But he wasn't, like, I don't know anything about him except that he wasn't a very good goalie.
Yeah. And he's been the answer to a trivia question.
Yeah, yeah.
Excellent.
I'll take it.
All right, so now that you've proven yourself, I want to talk about Peter Chiarelli.
All right.
I just want to preface things by saying I don't want to talk really about my thoughts on the upcoming season, because I'll get to that in my preview in a couple weeks. But I want to hear your thoughts on the upcoming season.
Okay.
But I want your assessment of what Chiarelli has done this offseason.
Yeah, well, I kind of wish that his approach this offseason had been his approach to previous off seasons, because he hasn't done very much. He's brought in some PTOs, Chason, I think, and a defenseman who's played like 500 games. But he hasn't made any big moves. He didn't trade Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. He didn't make any dramatic franchise-altering moves on the back end. And so my assessment is he's just kind of sticking with what he's got. I think the reason that he's sticking with what he's got is because he doesn't have any options. Like, he really has hamstrung himself. He doesn't have the budget to sign a big-name free agent, and he's traded any credible assets except for Puljujärvi and Ryan Nugent-Hopkins and maybe Yamamoto.
And the pick.
And
This year.
the pick. But he's really doesn't have much in the way of wiggle room to make a trade at this moment.
Yeah. He's definitely painted himself into a corner. I want to ask you about this quote. Bob
Sure.
McKenzie did a podcast the other day. He opened by saying it would be a crime against hockey humanity if McDavid and the Oilers missed the playoffs this year.
Yeah.
David Staples did an article on that. He labeled it shots fired or something like that.
Yeah.
I feel that's just calling a spade a spade.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's, like, we live in a society where people are offended by the truth sometimes.
Right.
And that is true. Like, to have a player of his caliber and miss the playoffs in his 4th year, when you've had time to develop around him
Yeah.
and build around him, that would be a travesty. That would.
Yeah. Well, look, forget about a crime against the hockey watching public. Like, forget about the fans in Pittsburgh who don't get to see McDavid in the Stanley Cup final. And forget about the crime against Oilers fans who've missed the playoffs 11 of the last 12 seasons. Just think about the shame that this is for McDavid, who has been absolutely as advertised. He's done everything that they could have asked of him. If you'd scripted the ideal first 3 seasons, you probably would take out the broken collarbone.
Yeah.
But other than that, he's been absolutely what the Oilers needed. He's done his job, and the Oilers have not been as good as McDavid has been. like quite a lot worse, in fact.
Yeah.
And so you think like McDavid doesn't have a realistic shot of winning the Stanley Cup on his entry-level contract the way that Sidney Crosby did. He doesn't have a realistic shot of winning a gold medal because of forces beyond his control. And all of a sudden now his resume looks a whole lot thinner than other young guys like Jonathan Toews or Sidney Crosby. And that has nothing to do with what McDavid has done. It has everything to do with the way that forces beyond his control have played with the hockey world.
I see like how much responsibility he took for last year when none of it was his fault. And even that stupid, whoever it was, heckling him at the restaurant when he was with his family. And just, I even heard like just things that other players have said to him and whatnot. And just the abuse he takes. And yet he's still like, when he did his acceptance speech at the NHL Awards and he apologized to the city of Edmonton and the fans. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, he's so humble and down to earth, and he's so hardworking and so talented, and yet,
yeah. Well, we don't know what happened in that heckling situation. Like, it might have been that he paired a white wine with a steak or something. In which case, like, you've got to say something about that. You know, we can't let that go.
Yeah. I want to get back to Chiarelli for a minute.
Sure.
My concern is that if they fire him, that Wayne Gretzky steps in.
I think that Wayne Gretzky could plausibly be worse.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I do.
How?
I mean,
How could he plausibly be worse?
Well, I watched the highlights from the 2002 Olympics. There was some sort of, they do those commemorative things on YouTube. And I watched it the other day. I mean, was it ever easy to put that team together?
Yeah.
Like he had Yzerman, Sakic, and Lemieux. Those were his top three centermen.
Yeah.
So, I mean, an idiot could have picked that team. I'm not saying Gretzky's an idiot, but anyone could have done that.
Yeah.
And then his coaching resume in Arizona, in Phoenix at the time, is terrible. He was a terrible coach, and he coached for like 4 years, which is incredible. He has no credentials. I mean, a few of the guys involved in the organization.
Other than being the greatest hockey player of all time by a mile.
Yes.
Right?
But
which doesn't mean that he can manage a team.
Exactly.
You know.
My concern even that he's already involved in the decision-making
Look,
somehow.
So the choice is between Chiarelli and not Chiarelli, and I would prefer not Chiarelli. I will take the lucky dip. Just reach into the envelope, every other name in the hockey world, just pull one out at random. Be like, look, Pat Falloon is your new general manager for the Edmonton Oilers. I'll take it. I'll take anybody. And part of that is forward-looking. Like, I don't want him to do with the assets that we will have what he has done with the assets that we did have. But part of that is punitive. Part of that is backward-looking. I want him to suffer. Like, if there's a way that we could find for Peter Chiarelli to, like, what's the worst job in hockey?
Right, or anything in Ottawa or Montreal, or even Vancouver, actually.
Yeah, okay. I want him to be the general manager of the Ottawa Senators. Yeah.
Okay.
That's what I want him to do.
Let's talk about the things that he's done.
All right.
Chiarelli. So back when they made the Griffin Reinhart deal, you had made a comment or on something on Facebook saying you needed me to help you sort it out. So I made a blog on that, and I still stand behind the principle behind the deal.
Yeah.
But the follow-through wasn't there.
As Griffin Reinhart is no longer an NHL player.
Yes. It made it worse that Barzal turned into such a good player. They could have picked a couple other guys there that he might not have been as good of a pick. So I understand that one in principle. The Hall-Larson one, I have documented my thoughts very thoroughly on that one. But the Eberle-Strome one, that's the one for me that, to me, it's the one that I understand the least, to be honest with you.
Oh, really? Okay.
Like, not the aftermath, like what's happened since then, but just at the time of making the trade, I understand, okay, when they made the Reinhart deal, okay, we need a defenseman, and we need a young defenseman to grow with the team. Okay, well, let's make a really bad trade for a young defenseman.
Right.
Okay, the Taylor Hall-Larson trade. Well, we still need a young defenseman.
Yeah.
And everyone in the league knows it, and they're not valuing our other assets at all. We're going to trade Taylor Hall.
Yeah.
I understand it. Again, don't agree with it necessarily completely, but I understand it. The Eberle for Strome one, it was like, okay, we're a year away from having cap difficulties, so we have a full calendar year to get things figured out. He's coming off of a bad season in which I think it was a career low in 82 games in points for him and a terrible playoffs that left a sour taste in everyone's mouth.
But he still, I think that year he had 19 goals.
Well, I think he still scored 20.
Okay.
I think.
Because he had a hat trick in the last game against Vancouver, I think.
That's right. So he traded him for a player who has struggled, again, from the Islanders, to save cap space that didn't really need to be saved. So that's the one I don't even understand how they started having that conversation, let's make this deal. And I told you, and I don't necessarily agree with this, I was emotional at the time. I told you last year, I sent you a text during a game, and I said, Ryan Strome's going to be playing in the American Hockey League next year.
Yeah.
I don't believe that, but he just, I didn't see much there. And I would have rather have taken last year the $6 million Eberle with the flaws in his game, even if he was going to score 20, 25 goals for the team.
Yeah.
And then, yes, you're forced to trade him this year, but you got to do it. So anyway, that's how I view those three deals.
Yeah.
You can go ahead and let loose and tell me how you feel about all three of them.
I think that my short answer would be he gambled and lost, and that's really all there is to it. He gambled that Reinhart was as good as the 4th overall pick, but now has advanced 2 or 3 years from that draft pick, and so we're trading the 4th overall pick for the 13th overall pick, plus a little bit more for a guy who's developed and can plug into the lineup right away. And he was wrong. He was just wrong about that. So, but it doesn't matter that there was a sensible, coherent reason for making the trade. All that matters is the results were bad. We were talking about Mr. Grant Ledyard just a little while ago, and he was skating backwards, and you could see what he was trying to do. He's trying to get between Marchand and the net, right?
Yeah.
As he was going backwards, he stumbled somehow, and he wasn't able to do the thing that he intended to do. And Marchand went around him and shot the puck into the net, and his team won, and Mr. Ledyard's team out. They lost. They lost the game. I think the approach that Ledyard took of being, slow and out of position and trying to keep up going backwards with one of the fastest guys in the league going forwards, that was a bad approach. But that's debatable, right? Like maybe if he hadn't stumbled, we'd be looking at a different outcome. But he did stumble and arguably took a bad approach at trying to cut this scoring chance off. So I would say the same thing about Chiarelli. Bad choice to trade, your second best player and maybe one of the few elite left wings in the league for, maybe their second best defender from New Jersey. Bad approach, but it didn't really pan out the way that he hoped because one guy won the MVP and the other guy he has not won the Norris Trophy. He has not. He has not panned out in sort of that. He has not won an MVP either, but also wasn't one of the best defensemen yet.
Not arguing the trade, but again, just the principle behind it.
Sure.
This was coming from an Oilers fan that for years had watched the manager just seem completely tone deaf to the fan base and completely lacking self-awareness about the state of his team.
Right.
That seeing Chiarelli come in and identify obvious needs, okay, we got to fix this. That was refreshing. So, I mean, I know that's sad to actually say, like, something so fundamental.
He identified an obvious need, and then he went out and didn't fill it. Like the same day that that Larson came from New Jersey for Hall, PK Subban was traded as well.
Yeah, like 15 minutes later.
Yeah, I would have felt differently if what he'd done was traded Hall for PK Subban, Now, my guess is that he wasn't allowed to do that because the fellow in Montreal said, I'm not interested in your guy. But it's not good enough to just be like, well, okay, we can't get the best right-hand defenseman on the market. Let's take a different one. What we have now is a different right-handed defenseman. It was a bad choice, and I have the benefit of looking back on this, like living where I live. In the future, I can say that wasn't a good choice, and I also have the benefit of living here in the future, being able to say Chiarelli should be fired for making that mistake, and we should bring somebody else in who won't make those kind of mistakes anymore. I think Larson is he seems like a real solid guy, and people seem to like him. I haven't heard any rumors about bad behavior around Larson. He's just a guy.
Yeah.
He's a guy. But you don't trade Taylor Hall for him, please. Like, do you think that we could get Taylor Hall back?
No, but he was not the player he is now when he was in Edmonton. It's partially on him and it's partially on the team. They didn't develop him properly, but at the same time, I don't think he took very much ownership for his role as a player until last year.
I'm willing to accept that. But I will also say that trading him is 100% on the team. That was 100% the team's choice.
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
And
so I'm not blaming Taylor Hall and I'm not giving him any credit for blossoming.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that the trade was really bad. Yeah.
That's fair. I said earlier in the summer, I didn't want him to do much.
He didn't.
And he didn't do much.
Yep.
And I'm happy about that. There's two things that are head scratchers for me, though. One is buying out Eric Greiba.
Yeah.
The struggle I have there is when players do something that makes him happy, he feels like he owes them one, even though he's already paying them a whole bunch of money to do what they did to make him happy. Greiba scored the goal to break the playoff drought. He scored that clinching goal that got them into the playoffs. So for whatever reason, rather than just trade Greiba, he wasn't on a huge deal. Rather than just trade him to somewhere else to give him an opportunity or even waive him, he bought him out, and I'm not sure how much that buyout is, but now we're hearing rumors about how the Oilers and Nurse are like $300,000 apart, and it's like, well, just
We
like a
could've
month,
used
2
that.
months ago. Yeah, what?
Yeah.
I don't understand the rationale behind that at all.
I think it's interesting that you've applied a narrative of, that Greiba scored the goal that got the Oilers into the playoffs, and so Chiarelli feels that he owes him. I don't think there's any reason at all. And my theory would be that he didn't know that buying him out was going to cost money against the cap. Like, here's the basic thing. I think Peter Chiarelli's not too terribly bright. Now, here's the reason why I think that. Because he keeps doing all these not too terribly bright things. Like trading Taylor Hall or picking up Griffin Reinhart.
I think it's that he...
Here's your story, okay? Let's just pause for 1 second.
You're going to tell my story?
Yeah, here's your
Okay.
story. Chiarelli is looking back, and he's like, who is responsible for breaking the playoff drought? You know who it was? It was Greiba, because he scored the last goal. I should give him a gift, a parting gift, because he's meant so much to this franchise, because he was the one who got us into the playoffs.
Yeah.
My story is, he didn't realize that it was going to cost him money against the cap to buy him out.
Yeah.
Occam, the medieval philosopher, he warns against the needless proliferation of entities. Your story involves a memory that's able to cast back and recognize that Greiba was the one who scored the goal that got him into the playoffs. Nobody knows that except for you. You're the only person on earth that knows that. And then to overlook the fact that McDavid is playing on the same team as Greiba, and then say, who did this? It was Greiba. My story only requires him to just not be paying too terribly close attention to the arcane rules of salary cap management in the current, Players Association contract thing?
I think it's that he is such a poor negotiator
Yeah.
that he does not have the courage to sit down with someone and lay out the facts and say, this is what I'm offering you. Instead, he comes in and they say, this is what I want. And he's like, oh, man, okay, yeah, sure, just sign here. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't think it's a lack of intelligence. I think it's a lack of
But we can see,
courage.
okay, so where we agree is that the problem is he doesn't have the virtues that are necessary to be a general
Yes,
manager
yes.
in the National Hockey League.
Yes.
I don't tweet very often, but I tweeted after McDavid was sent to the Oilers, after we won the lottery.
Okay.
So the Oilers win the lottery, and then there was instant jubilation, and I'm so excited. And then I thought, now what would be better? To have Jack Eichel and have McTavish and Kevin Lowe manage the assets of the Calgary Flames, or to have McDavid and McTavish and Kevin Lowe, everybody stays in place. That's how I felt at that moment. I was thinking, we got to get rid of the old boys club. Mm-hmm. And what happened immediately next? We bring in, by all accounts, a solid hockey man to manage the team, and I'm thinking, we got a guy in the back office. We've got a generational talent playing center for my team. Mm-hmm. This feels so good. But if at that moment, instead of bringing in Chiarelli, they had brought in an actual bucket leaning on top of a mop, our team would be so much better. Our team would be so much better now. And the thing that you're worried about is that firing Chiarelli leaves a vacuum that's going to be filled with somebody who's worse. But I just think it doesn't matter. Let's not fire him for the future. Let's fire him for the past. Let's fire him because it's just going to feel so good. It's going to feel so good to watch him leave. It'll be so pleasant for him not to work here anymore.
What I don't understand is, after this season, whether this season goes well or horribly wrong, they're actually going to be in a really difficult situation next year, because...
And the year after that. And the year after that.
And
the year after that.
Okay, well, hold on, no, because Russell's deal will be off the books. He has 3 years left.
Right. But they will still have Lucic. Do you remember Lucic?
Yeah, I remember Lucic.
He's going to be still on the books until 2047.
No, that can't be right.
No, that's right. Look it up.
They don't have enough money to pay the team they have now next year if this team plays well.
But we do agree that it's not a good team now, right? Like, we agree about that.
I think they can battle for a playoff spot. And that is based solely on, I think Connor McDavid's going to score 130 points this year.
Right.
I kid you not. But yes, it's a middle of the pack team.
It feels like you should be either in salary cap trouble or you should have a middle of the pack team. And they've kind of combined these two vices into one super bad situation. Mm-hmm. And it feels to me like maybe they should have organized it so that they were either dealing with one or the other. The thing that gives me comfort is that it's a very, very narrow margin for error league. Mm-hmm. And so the guys that are the worst players in the NHL are astronomically better than any hockey players that we know. Mm-hmm. And the teams that are the worst are a couple of moves away from catching up. And we saw that, like last year, Colorado made the playoffs. And that team was absolutely garbage the year before that. And I don't think Joe Sakic's a particularly good general manager.
You can so quickly rise and fall. And even last year, people were predicting the Oilers to be in the final. A lot of them were predicting them in the final. And now this year, I haven't seen anywhere that's predicting them in the playoffs.
Do you know why that is?
Why is that, Dave?
Well, it's just because they're not a very good hockey team.
The first 10 games of the year, it's my understanding they're quite difficult.
Yeah.
And so you wanted to make a bet. on what was the bet exactly?
Well, I was gambling that that the Oilers would be below 500 for the first 10 games.
Okay.
And I want you to make a tweet that just sort of makes public that you are a disgruntled Oilers fan, because you're such an optimistic guy, and you're always like, I don't know. I give him the benefit of the doubt. Let's just let's see where it's going to go. It's a game of inches, and so I want you to put out there, Chiarelli's got to go. I'm horrified by the decisions that he's made. I want you to publicly put that on your Twitter feed, and if they are above 500, then I'll buy you a coffee, but not a specialty coffee.
No, that was if you won. If I win, I would definitely like a specialty drink. I like French vanilla. So,
all right.
Okay, good. Let's shake on that. And again, Dave, thank you for sitting down with me. This was a lot of fun.
I can assure you that this was my great pleasure.
Excellent. Okay, so stay tuned for my Oilers season preview, probably coming up the first week of October. I'll see you then.
And if you're interested, I have a barbecue channel. No, I don't.